Hi, everybody. Welcome to Presometer's live webinar, 7 Air Quality Data Trends Businesses Need to Know. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded and emailed to you afterwards. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. To ask questions, please use the Q&A panel that can be found when you click on the QA button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will have time at the end of the webinar for your questions. And if we don't have enough time to get to the questions, we will follow up with you afterwards. On the webinar's agenda today, addressing air pollution and its health effects, why are businesses paying attention to the air, the challenges with air quality data integration, major trends your businesses should know, use cases, the benefits of air quality data, and your questions. Our hosts today are Dr. Gabriela Adler, the Chief Scientist here at Presometer, and Uri Schasterman, Head of Business Development and Strategic Alliances of Americas. Take it away, Uri.
So thank you so much, Ronit, and the marketing team for arranging this great webinar. Much appreciated. And let's cut straight to the chase. A little bit about us. Presometer is a software company that uses big data and machine learning to provide you with hyperlocal air quality and pollen data. And we offer that data to numerous industries. Now, I think most people on this call are probably aware of the fact that air quality is invisible, which makes it a major challenge to us. But what we're trying to do is really democratize the environment and offer people visibility and also simple, intuitive action items that they can take in order to do something about mitigating the damage from air pollution. Because let's just use a very basic example. Pretend right now that the outdoor air quality is bad. If I know that, we can just close the windows and doors, turn on the air conditioning, and that in and of itself would actually mitigate 95% of the damage from air pollution. So there's a lot of little intuitive steps that we can make to make a difference in our lives. And we provide that data through our API and the various features you see here on the slide, whether it's pollutant concentrations or pollen data, so people can take those simple actions and do something about it. But before we get started about the different trends of air pollution, maybe we'll just go to the basics and understand exactly what is air pollution. And Gabby, maybe you can just give us a quick overview about that.
Yeah, so air pollution is a mixture of both particles and gases that at high concentration could be harmful for us. Air pollution can come from either anthropogenic sources, meaning man-made, such as factory emissions or traffic, and it can come from natural sources, for example, volcanic ash or mineral dust or pollen.
Perfect. So let me just go over and show a quick illustration. So I mentioned before that people are aware of the fact that air quality is invisible, but I think what people are not so aware of is just how hyperlocal air quality is and how dynamic it is. And you're about to see a quick video of London. And this is the heat map of the air quality. Red is bad, green is good, and you can see the time ticker on the top left corner of the map over here. And you can see how quickly it changes throughout the city. Various areas within the city show completely different air quality data. Streets as far away, like 1 or 2 miles away from one area could be really bad conditions, and another one could be really great, and in the morning it could be terrible, and 2 or 3 hours later, it could be amazing air quality conditions. And I think this image or this video kind of tells a lot of words, because government monitoring stations is pretty much, before Presometer came about, was the only source of reliable air quality data. And those government monitoring stations are really great. They cost a lot of money and they cost even more to maintain, but they give an accurate picture. But just 2 or 3 miles away from those government monitoring stations can be completely different air quality levels. And that's where we come into place, because a lot of it is really based on the local air quality. For example, traffic affects air quality. Local weather conditions affect air quality. Factories, etc., they affect all those local conditions affect the air quality, which makes it so dynamic and hyperlocal. But beyond that, there's actually a bit of a global challenge as well. It's not just about the local air quality conditions, it's also about the global conditions. And maybe Gabby, being a rocket scientist, a certified, a PhD in atmospheric science, give us a bit more of an insight look as far as the global challenge that we're facing with air quality.
So I think most of our listeners would be surprised to know that the air quality is not only affected by the local sources, which is quite intuitive, traffic or local emissions, but also it can come from far, far away. And this video done by NASA shows you a type of a pollutant called particulate matter, and it contains different types of particles. So let's focus, for example, on the orange in the map, which is mineral dust. It's not dust that you have in your apartment, but rather a dust that comes from a desert. And in this case, you can see how the Sahara Desert transfers all the way, crosses the Atlantic to Brazil, which is quite a long distance. What that means is that if you are located in France and you see dust on your car windshield, it can come from the Sahara Desert, which is quite far.
That's amazing. And what I love about this particular video, if you look at it, it's almost like you see the equator quite clearly. I mean, just north of it, you see the sandstorms just described. To the south of it, we do see all these little green and white circles over there. What are those exactly?
So if you look at the legend, it would say organic carbon and black carbon. And let me put it in words that everyone can understand. That means fire. So there are massive wildfires in Africa and South America.
That's just amazing because, again, people in America can be suffering from sandstorms that are happening in Central Africa or from fires from there. Let's talk about a bit more about the air pollution before we go further about the trends. And I think people are familiar with the World Health Organization's numbers about that. It affects virtually the entire world's population. The cost that it has, 7 million deaths, which is more than HIV, malaria, and car accident injuries and death from that combined. So at the end of the day, we know the macro level, but there's a lot of effect that it has. Maybe we should just focus a bit on the individual. What does it do for us? How does air pollution really affect us, Gabby?
So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, who is us, right? So who is this general public? Are you a senior? Are you a pregnant woman?
She's pointing to me when she says pregnant women, but that's just a joke, okay?
Are you a child, an athlete? So air pollution could affect you differently depending on that. The effect of air pollution could be divided into short-term effects and long-term effects. Short-term effects, these are things that you experience on a day-to-day basis, which you might not be aware of, like headaches and coughing. The severity is highly dependent on who you are. One person could cough while the other could have pneumonia. Long-term effects are a bit scarier, I would say, and less talked about. And they include Alzheimer, heart diseases, fertility problems for both men and women, premature labor, and I even saw a study discussing the connection between air pollution and happiness.
Okay, so I want to keep this actually on a happy note because, again, there's a lot that we can actually do about air quality in terms of mitigating the damage from it. And you mentioned the word happiness here, and I just want to talk to you about specifically one of the first use cases that we actually had. And that was something that we did with Mount Sinai Hospital. The idea was they created an app for their asthma patients, and the idea was to see whether or not once the asthma patients are aware of outdoor air quality conditions, would that reduce asthma attacks and hospitalizations or not? And the interesting thing was the answer was a resounding yes, which we kind of anticipated because we perceived that if somebody is aware about the outdoor air quality conditions and you can make it visible for them and intuitive with a call to action, they would do something about it and obviously reduce mitigate the risk from it. But what we were surprised to see was really the amount of times that actually they spent outdoor. Because when the study started, we were very concerned that people would look at the information about the outdoor air quality or air pollution as something which is scary, maybe like a diet app, a restrictive app. Don't eat this, don't drink that, pace yourself. But in a sense, it was actually the exact opposite. It was more like a liberating app, meaning it enabled them to spend more times outdoors because by definition, the people in New York City, I guess, those asthma patients presumed that the outdoor air quality was bad all the time, where in fact, Breezometer through our API could actually let them know exactly when the outdoor air quality conditions were actually good, and they could spend more times outdoors. They can pick the times of the day they can spend more times outdoors. They can decide if they want to go for a walk 2 blocks east as opposed to 2 blocks west. So the goal here is really to not restrict people. It's quite the contrary. The goal is really to allow people to live their lives, to liberate them, to make them aware about the air quality conditions, but engage them in such a way that they can live their lives to the fullest in a healthy way. And maybe what we'll do is we'll just kind of jump now straight to the trends that we were talking about earlier and see how the various examples of how these trends that we've seen over the last year or two. Because if we look again, people were aware about air quality a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, even further back, but they weren't necessarily aware of all the ramifications of it. So the first trend we're going to talk about a bit is about the real-time trend. And I'm using the weather app example here intentionally for that reason. Because weather is something that we're all familiar with, and most of us check it maybe once or twice a day. I guess depends on where you live around the world. But air quality is far more dynamic than that. And as a result of that, people actually have to check air quality more often than that. So on aggregate, we see from what we call wellness app or weather apps or clients like that, and major increase in user engagement and times checked simply because people are coming in to check and understand what the air quality is right now in real time. So it's an increase on average of about 2.4 times on aggregate for many of our customers in that regard. And that's really the key, because air quality is dynamic. It's not like weather, it changes much more often than that. And the same can be applied to another trend, which is the location-based. Whereas in the past, people were looking to get information on a citywide level for air quality, but it's almost irrelevant to do it in such a way. As we saw earlier in the image of the City of London, and all of you guys are welcome to just check out our heat map on our site and see for yourself how different areas within the same city have completely different air quality conditions. So location-based is crucial here. And one of the examples that we have is with some of our clients who are in the air purification and HVAC space. So they can notify their customers and let them know exactly what the outdoor air quality conditions are, and also showcase their value proposition. The indoor air quality is great, the outdoor air quality is less than great. You can see the difference in what the HVAC or air purifier and how much of a difference it makes within the house. And this is just an example from Blue Air. We have that with Dyson and Johnson Controls and many of the top leading brands when it comes to that. But again, more than that, one of the things that we're seeing in terms of the ROI is that people are buying more devices as a result. And ironically, some devices that may have bought in the past without being aware about the outdoor air quality data were literally collecting dust. Because if somebody would open their window, look outside, see that it's a beautiful, brisk day, they may think and decide that the air quality is great. But again, it's not really available. That information is incorrect, where in fact the air quality can be bad. So as a result, they're turning on the air purifier and using it in sales. Salvage renewal sales went up and filter sales as well. One of the most, to me, I think personally, is one of the most exciting changes that we're seeing is really the change from people relying on the AQI and moving on to the pollutant concentration. I'm going to have Gabby elaborate a bit more about this because it's an important topic, because people have been misusing, I guess, the air quality index to a certain extent, because the air quality index is typically defined by the worst dominant pollutants. Most countries don't have it as an average. They determine thresholds for each pollutant, and based on their interpretation of those thresholds, they determine what's the worst dominant pollutant, and therefore the air quality index is defined by that. So you can easily see situations where in one country, certain air quality conditions are defined as good, where in another country, the same identical air quality conditions would be defined actually as bad or even moderate, because it's just cynically manipulated. So maybe, Gabby, can you just give us a bit more information about the pollutant concentration element of it?
Yes. So as Uri, as you said rightfully, air quality index could be political. But even if we look at the countries that their air quality index is based on epidemiological studies, which means medical studies connecting air pollution to hospital admission, these studies are not specific enough. What does it mean? If I'm a pregnant woman, I don't care only about the dominant pollutant, I care about the second dominant pollutant and the combination between the different pollutant concentrations.
Perfect. So it's a perfect segue to the next trend that I want to talk about, which is more the personalized, or I call the intuitive or the personalized. It's the call to action, but call to action based on segment. Because as Gabby just mentioned, air pollution has different effects on different sections of the populations. And I'm using sections of the population as an example because demographics is not the right term for it. But we have, for example, we have identified 7 different types of population segments that could be affected by air pollution. Let's divide them as to general population, the elderly, young, people with heart disease, people with lung disease, pregnant women, and athletes. And I'll talk more about athletes later, but athletes are actually one of the most underappreciated in terms of understanding how bad air quality affects them. And an athlete running outdoors is inhaling much more air than the average person. So they too need to be on alert to understand what the air quality conditions are. So we can personalize the recommendations, as you can see here. Different segments of the populations get different recommendations based on the specific pollutant concentrations, not just on the air quality index. But in addition to that, so they could be good recommendations, like as go outside, time to go outdoors, the air quality is great. And by the same token, if the air quality is not as good, warning them, letting them know what they can do to mitigate the damage and being affected by the bad outdoor air quality. Another very nice example that we have in, I guess, personalization and action is the connected inhaler that we have a partnership with in CapCode. CapCode basically uses Breezometer's air quality data to engage their users. So what they're doing is letting their customers know exactly what the outdoor air quality is. Based on that, these asthma patients can then make a determination whether or not what they need to do. It could be very intuitive. Tell them to take certain preventative measures or medicine or inhaler, whatever it is. But better yet, this is on the engagement side. On the analytics and research and development side of the business, they're also able to understand what happened prior to every time the client or the customer use the puffer. So if somebody used the inhaler, they know what preceded it. They can see the correlation between different pollutants and different concentration levels. So there's a lot of R&D element here in terms of correlation and cause and effect that a lot of the digital health analytics companies as well as pharmaceutical companies are finding very helpful over here. Another trend we see is the data visualization. A heat map tells a picture, and their colors of red and green tell a picture here. And often that is the segue that kind of introduces people to air quality to make them aware of what it is. And people start understanding, again, the hyperlocality nature. So we see that. Another very nice example we see here is actually with AllTrails. AllTrails is the leading app and website for hikers and those who want to do trekking and biking outdoors. And they have a heat map overlay showing exactly what the outdoor air quality conditions are on a map on a visual way, so people can decide what hikes they wish to take. Again, due to the hyperlocal nature of it all and due to the activities that are endured by athletes that are inhaling more air than the average person, they are particularly sensitive to outdoor air quality data. And therefore, it's important for them to know and better understand which trek they can be using it. Let's move on to the IoT automation side of things. So we spoke before about understanding the effects and triggers from air pollution on a personal level. But whereas in the past, those recommendations were done something along the lines of a trigger or a recommendation of sorts, now it can be automated. And here's a couple of examples that we have of that. One is with Delos that creates a smart home environment, and their whole business is based on smart homes, creating wellness-related homes. And they can decide, based on certain triggers, to activate things in an automation way. So you can do notification and alerts as one way to, and turn on the air purification system as a result. Or it could also be automated based on specific triggers. So if certain pollutant concentrations are high, their recommendations could be turn on the HVAC system in the house, do it on indoor recycle like we see here on the glass automation, the glass device from Johnson Controls. But you can also do it manually. You can decide on your own what triggers it, and obviously control a lot of those things from an app, not just from the dashboard inside your house. Let's move on to the maybe last trend. And before maybe I'll give the example here, Gabby, maybe you can give us, we're familiar with the numbers, I think, overall about pollen, and which I guess is more of a natural pollutant, but it affects 50 million Americans. A lot of money spent every single year on allergy medications, and it's increasing the chance of asthma. Can you give us a bit of a connection between, I guess, air pollution and pollen?
Yes, so the first thing is that pollen is a particulate matter. It's so it's a type of air pollution. That's the first thing. And the second is the allergic reaction of pollen can be enhanced in the presence of air pollution.
Perfect. So let's give you one very simple example. This is a nice example that we have with ALK, which is a pharmaceutical. They're running this right now in Europe. It's an app. It's an app meant to alert pollen, people who suffer from pollen allergies to exactly what the outdoor air quality conditions are in terms of pollen. So you can see what are the dominant pollens right now. Some people are only allergic to birch. Others are allergic to olive. Different people have different types of allergies. So we do break it down to 10 types of trees and grass as well. So based on their various sensitivities, they can control the pollen allergy and see what they can do in order to address the particular effects, the irritation or allergies that they were getting as a result of the pollen. Now, one of the most difficult tasks we have here, and we've gotten a lot of questions from the audience about this, is explain our technology, something that we worked on for the last 5 years. A tremendous amount of big data and machine learning has been put into this. And so, Gabby, you got the pleasure of trying to sum up the last 5 years of 40 different development engineers into 2 minutes. Good luck with that. I'll try to see what I can do to help, but it's not easy to do, so go ahead.
Okay, so let me try and walk you through it. Let's start with the monitoring station, the government monitoring station that Uri mentioned before. They're expensive equipment that is well maintained, and they measure different types of pollutants, so they have different sensors. And we collect data from over 41,000 sensors worldwide in more than 80 countries. And it's pretty intuitive how we use this information. Now we also use weather, which can be, I'll give you 2 examples. One is intuitive, the other is less intuitive. So the first one is rain. We all feel that air quality is really good after rain, and it's true, actually. Rain cleans out particulate matter. It cleans out pollen as well. The non-intuitive example is the sun. Ozone is created in the presence of sun. So I can be outside in a really nice sunny day, but it's really polluted outside and I cannot feel it because I cannot smell it and I cannot see it. So that's another example. We also use dispersion models. These are models that predict how the pollutants move in time and space from one place to another. We also collect, or we use traffic data. We collect the data every 13 minutes, and we connect between the traffic and air pollution using machine learning. And this is, I think, quite intuitive to understand that traffic actually affects air pollution. The other thing that we do is pollen, which is a bit more tricky since there is a biological factor to it. And we need to put into our models phenological factors, seasonality, emission of different types of vegetation, the land cover, etc. So all this information goes into our algorithm, and we first do quality assurance to make sure that the data is valid. And then we use geostatistical analysis and machine learning based algorithms to provide you with 2 APIs, one for air quality and the other for pollen.
Perfect. So, and again, those APIs are basically then integrated in any way the customer wants. So for example, some people are talking about the business applications here. It could be used on mobile devices, on watches and apps, also on the website. As I mentioned, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies and health analytics companies are using this data also to do a lot of correlation work behind the scenes in that regard. So the one thing I love about this particular business that we're in is that people always find new ideas and new uses for our API in ways that we never imagined. Most recently, we signed up, L'Oreal is now using our API for skincare application. That's something, if you would have told me 2 or 3 years ago that L'Oreal will be using our data for skincare products, I probably would not have imagined that, but that's something that's done. So I know there's a lot of innovation people sitting there listening into this conversation. We're just sharing the technology and what it can do, but it's really, oftentimes the best creative ideas come from the, product managers and innovation managers that come up with new ideas and new ways to integrate our data. And maybe just to wrap things up before we go to the takeaways and the Q&A, what are the benefits? There's the obvious benefit of engaging the user, of making them aware about outdoor air quality data, because there's a lot we can do to mitigate the damage. If you're talking about an IoT device, whether it's air purification or HVAC, again, just turning it on when it's polluted would mitigate 90% of the damage. We've seen major increases in sales for those IoT connected devices, both in terms of unit sales, but also in terms of filtration sales and service fees. In terms of just user engagement on an aggregate level, if you're looking at apps that had existed before, but just introduced the air quality features to it, that increased engagement on average by 2.4 times. And specifically, if you're looking at the heat map alone, we're seeing a greater increase on the heat map usage. And now it's the average session for the heat map usage is now 44 seconds. So before I wrap it up and give it back to the Q&A to Ronit, I just want to say thank you again to Ronit and to the marketing team for doing a great job putting this together. Much appreciated. And Gabby, you have a parting thought, I think, for us as well.
Right. I want to add that the average adult inhales 7 to 8 liters of air every minute, and that sums up to 11,000 liters of air per day. So, Ronit and Rory, thank you, and let's breathe well.
Amen to that.
Thanks, Gabby. Indeed, let's breathe well. Thanks, guys. Just want to have one more look at our takeaways from what we learned today. Businesses have an opportunity to make a positive impact, because as we learn, air pollution affects everyone. Air quality data monitoring relies on proper technology, and the proper integration of air quality and pollen data can increase user engagement and ROI. Now, as we come to a close, we want to take a couple of the questions, if you guys are up for it.
Yeah, we're ready. Yeah.
Fabulous. First one we have is, what exactly goes into integrating Brisometer's API?
Okay, so I guess I'll take that one. At the end of the day, a lot of it depends on how the client uses the data. The integration itself is very quick. I think the average, once they try the API, they integrate it, the onboarding is usually done on a pilot phase. We're talking about 1 to 4 hours max. That's how long the integration itself takes. Oftentimes, if they come back with some specific questions, it could be a bit longer, but it's a matter of hours to a day or so. And the API codes are very simple. So, for example, if somebody has started with us in a particular country, but they want to expand to other countries, it's the same API code, same developer keys. All they have to do is, there's a field that we open up to add additional countries. So, obviously, the integration is super fast and super simple.
Great, thanks, Uri. One more question before we go. How do you guys check your accuracy?
Okay, so I'll take that one, or if you have something to add, please do. We have a continuous accuracy testing system, and it's really important for us to test our accuracy continuously. And since we cannot deploy measurements to test our accuracy all the time worldwide in more than 80 countries, what we do is we use leave one out method. What is that? Imagine that outside of your office, there are 5 monitoring stations, and you use all of them to put in your algorithm. Now I take one off, and I try to predict what is the air quality in the location of the station without using the data of the station. And then I compare the actual measurement from the station to what the algorithm predicted.
Perfect. Okay, I couldn't say it better myself. That's amazing. Another questions that we saw here is about, you want to maybe read me the questions? I can see it as well right now.
Have you applied machine learning or AI to forecast air pollution?
That is, so the answer to the question is yes. The machine learning is what we use to do with that. I mean, if I were to, I was explaining this to my kids the other day, how the machine learning process works by us. So basically, if you're looking at the raw data, the first thing we do is actually validate the data. We don't take the government monitoring stations sensors straight into the algorithm. We first want to make sure that the information is correct. And oftentimes, up to, let's say, 12% of the time, it could be incorrect because of, it could be that a frozen IT feed. It could be that the sensor hasn't been calibrated. And after that, the data then goes into the whole machine learning processing, and algorithms are used over there. So it's almost like the way I explained to my kids was, you want to make sure if you're cooking a good meal, you want to make sure you have great ingredients, and then you can be the greatest cook in the world, but if the ingredients are not good, it's not going to be that good. So we do care about the veracity of the data before it actually goes into the algorithm. That's where we run the machine learning validation. And after we run the machine learning validation, on the data or the vegetables, whichever way you want to, if I took my cook example, then we run the algorithms on it and to build it up from there.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Uri. I just want to take one more moment to thank our speakers today, Gabby and Uri. It was great and informative. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today for our webinar live event. Can't wait to see you all at the next one.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.